Was the mask created for Tutankhamun or for someone else?
This is how one ancient artifact revealed evidence of intentional alteration that went unnoticed for more than 3,000 years. It follows how modern scientific scanning of King Tutankhamun's gold funerary mask exposed physical changes hidden beneath its surface. What began as a routine examination ended up challenging long-standing assumptions about royal burial practices, political succession, and historical erasure in ancient Egypt. The face the world thought it knew. When Howard Carter opened the sealed tomb of King Tutankhamun in November 1922, the discovery immediately reshaped modern understanding of ancient Egypt. The tomb, located in the Valley of the Kings near Luxor, contained thousands of objects preserved in remarkable condition. Chariots, ritual furniture, weapons, jewelry, and statues filled the chambers, but one artifact quickly eclipsed all others. Resting directly over the pharaoh's wrapped head was a solid gold funerary mask that would become the most recognizable image from the ancient world. The mask measures roughly 21 inches in height and weighs more than 22 pounds. It is constructed primarily of gold alloyed with small amounts of other metals, then inlaid with lapis lazuli, obsidian, quartz, and colored glass. The eyes were crafted to appear alert and lifelike. The eyebrows and cosmetic lines were shaped with deep blue stone. On the forehead sit two royal emblems, the cobra, symbol of Lower Egypt, and the vulture, symbol of Upper Egypt, together representing unified rule. Along the back, hieroglyphic text drawn from the Book of the Dead was engraved directly into the metal. To the ancient Egyptians, this object was not decorative. Gold was believed to be the physical substance of the gods, incapable of decay. The mask served a practical spiritual function. It was meant to preserve the identity of the deceased ruler and allow the soul, known as the Ka, to recognize its body in the afterlife. Without a correct likeness, religious doctrine held that the soul could become disoriented, unable to complete its journey beyond death. The mask was, in effect, an instrument designed to secure eternity. Because Tutankhamun ruled for only a brief period and died in his late teens, the survival of such a refined object seemed extraordinary. For decades, scholars described the mask as a singular masterpiece, created specifically for a young king whose burial escaped looting. Museums reproduced its image endlessly, textbooks cited it as a benchmark of royal craftsmanship, and exhibitions treated it as an untouched example of funerary art from Egypt's 18th dynasty. Yet even early on, careful observers noticed small inconsistencies. The facial proportions did not match all known depictions of Tutankhamun from reliefs and statues. The pierced earlobes conflicted with established artistic conventions for adult male pharaohs. Subtle variations in surface coloration appeared between the face and the headdress. These details were documented but largely dismissed, explained away as stylistic choices or quirks of preservation. For nearly a century, the mask remained protected behind glass, admired but rarely questioned. It was assumed to be exactly what it appeared to be, a single unified object made for a single ruler. That assumption would hold until modern science was finally allowed to examine the gold, not just as art, but as material with a physical history embedded inside it. The deadline that changed everything. The first major crack in the traditional story does not come from technology or chemistry. It comes from time, specifically a fixed religious deadline that governed every royal burial in ancient Egypt. According to long-standing funerary law, a pharaoh had exactly 70 days from death to burial. This window was not symbolic or flexible. It aligned with the disappearance of the star Sirius from the night sky, a celestial event tied to beliefs about death, rebirth, and cosmic order. When Sirius vanished, the soul of the king was believed to undergo its own passage through darkness. When the star returned, the king was meant to rise with it in the afterlife. Tutankhamun died suddenly, likely from complications following a severe leg injury. His death was not anticipated, and no evidence suggests his burial preparations were complete at the time he died. That immediately created a logistical crisis. Within 70 days, embalmers, priests, artisans, and administrators had to complete a full royal funeral sequence. This included mummification, ritual purification, construction or adaptation of burial equipment, preparation of the tomb itself, and the assembly of thousands of objects required for eternity. Modern specialists in ancient metallurgy and craft reconstruction have studied how long it takes to produce elite gold objects using Bronze Age tools. Even under ideal conditions, shaping, polishing, engraving, and inlaying a large gold object of royal quality requires months of uninterrupted labor. The mask attributed to Tutankhamun represents an extreme level of precision. Every surface detail had to be correct, every inscription aligned with religious formulae, and every inlay securely set. Compressing that workload into a 70-day window strains credibility. Archaeological evidence from the tomb reinforces this pressure. The burial chambers are smaller than those of earlier pharaohs. Wall paintings show uneven execution, visible brushstrokes, and areas where scenes appear incomplete. The stone sarcophagus bears damage along its edges, consistent with being forced into a space that was not originally designed for it. These details suggest adaptation rather than long-term planning. Objects inside the tomb tell a similar story. Certain items of jewelry appear proportioned for a female wearer. Some cartouches show signs of alteration, with earlier inscriptions partially erased and replaced. None of this indicates deception in the modern sense. In ancient practice, reuse was acceptable when circumstances demanded it. The priority was ritual completion, not originality. What makes this situation unique is the scale of improvisation required. A sudden royal death during a politically unstable period forced officials to work with what already existed. Every decision was governed by time, not aesthetics. Once the 70-day limit passed, the king's transition to the afterlife would be jeopardized, with consequences believed to extend to the stability of the entire kingdom. This context matters because it reframes later questions. If the burial was rushed, then perfection cannot be assumed. If reuse was already happening throughout the tomb, then no object, regardless of importance, can be automatically exempt. The mask did not exist in isolation. It was part of a larger emergency response shaped by religion, astronomy, and fear of cosmic disorder. The queen who vanished from the record. To understand why the mask eventually drew suspicion, attention had to shift away from Tutankhamun and toward a figure whose absence from history is as striking as his fame. That figure is Nefertiti, one of the most powerful women of the 18th dynasty. She was the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, the ruler who attempted to upend Egypt's religious system by elevating the sun disk Aten above all other gods. This period, centered in the city of Akhetaten near modern Amarna, produced a radical break from traditional political and artistic norms. Unlike earlier queens, Nefertiti was not confined to ceremonial visibility. Reliefs show her wearing crowns normally reserved for kings, performing rituals traditionally carried out by pharaohs, and striking enemies in scenes associated with sovereign authority. Her name appears prominently alongside Akhenaten's, and inscriptions treat her less as a consort and more as a partner in rule. This level of representation was without precedent in earlier dynasties. Then, around the 12th regnal year of Akhenaten, Nefertiti disappears from the official record. Her name stops appearing on monuments. New reliefs exclude her image entirely. This absence is abrupt and unexplained. No burial inscription survives. No identified mummy has ever been linked to her with certainty. For decades, Egyptology assumed she died quietly, possibly during a disease outbreak that affected the royal court. That explanation began to unravel when scholars examined records from the final years of Akhenaten's reign. A new ruler appears alongside him under the throne name Neferuaten. This name incorporates elements directly tied to Nefertiti's own royal titles. After Akhenaten's death, this individual seems to rule alone for a short period before disappearing as well. The sequence strongly suggests that Nefertiti did not die when her name vanished, but instead assumed kingship under a new identity. If correct, this changes her status entirely. As a ruling pharaoh, Nefertiti would have been entitled to full royal burial equipment, including a gold funerary mask bearing her throne name and titles. That equipment would have been prepared in advance, as was customary for monarchs whose rule was established and recognized. Her reign, though brief, occurred immediately before the accession of Tutankhamun, her stepson. This political transition matters because it places a completed set of royal funerary objects in close chronological proximity to Tutankhamun's unexpected death. It also explains why traces of a female ruler might surface within objects long assumed to belong exclusively to a male king. The Amarna period blurred boundaries that earlier eras kept rigid. Gendered iconography was already in flux, and names were politically dangerous. After the restoration of traditional religion under Tutankhamun, association with Akhenaten's reforms became a liability. Figures tied to the Atenist experiment were systematically removed from monuments. Names were erased, images were recarved. Historical memory was corrected to serve stability. In that environment, preserving evidence of a female pharaoh posed a threat. By the time Tutankhamun was buried, the state had every incentive to present continuity, not disruption. Objects that contradicted that message could not remain visible. If a ruler like Nefertiti had briefly held power, her material legacy would have required careful handling. Some things could be dismantled, others could be repurposed. What mattered most was that the public record reflected order, legitimacy, and divine approval. The restoration that changed access. For decades, Tutankhamun's funerary mask was considered effectively off-limits to modern science. Its fame made it untouchable, and its fragility discouraged anything beyond surface inspection. That barrier fell in 2014 when an unexpected accident forced authorities to intervene. During routine cleaning at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the ceremonial braided beard attached to the mask detached from the chin. The beard, a symbol connecting the pharaoh to Osiris, broke away cleanly, creating a visible fracture point. What followed intensified the situation. Museum staff attempted an immediate fix without consulting senior conservators. They used a modern epoxy adhesive, applying it directly to the gold. Excess adhesive spread beyond the join, leaving visible residue across the surface of one of the most important artifacts in the world. Images of the damage circulated publicly, prompting sharp criticism from conservation experts and cultural officials. The Egyptian government responded by opening a formal investigation and assembling an international restoration team. The project was led by Christian Ekman, a German metal conservator with experience working on ancient gold objects. His task was to remove the epoxy, stabilize the break, and reattach the beard using historically appropriate materials. Tests on other royal artifacts indicated that beeswax was the adhesive originally used in antiquity, making it the preferred choice for restoration. Before any physical repair could begin, the mask had to be analyzed in detail. This created a rare opportunity. For the first time since 1925, when the mask was removed from the mummy itself, scientists were granted full access to examine it using modern, non-invasive methods. Ekman's team selected X-ray fluorescence analysis, known as XRF, as the primary tool. XRF works by directing X-rays at a surface and measuring the secondary radiation emitted by the atoms inside the material. Each element produces a distinct signal, allowing researchers to identify chemical composition with high precision. The method does not require sampling, drilling, or surface damage, making it suitable for irreplaceable objects. The reasoning behind the test was simple. If the mask had been altered in antiquity, chemical inconsistencies should be present. Gold from different sources carries different ratios of silver and copper. Solder used to join separate pieces leaves detectable traces. Replaced sections should register measurable variation. The team scanned the face, the headdress, the cartouche containing the royal name, and the areas around the ears. According to the results, the gold composition was uniform across the entire object. No solder seams were identified. The glass inlays, especially around the eyes and headdress bands, showed no signs of thermal stress. Because traditional metal joining requires high heat that would damage glass, this detail was considered decisive. Based on these findings, Ekman concluded that the mask was created as a single unified object. The pierced ears were attributed to artistic convention. Facial proportions were explained as part of the Amarna period aesthetic. With the epoxy removed and the beard reattached using beeswax, the mask was returned to display. To most scholars, the matter was settled. The data appeared clear, the restoration complete. Yet the investigation had only answered one question: chemical composition. It had not addressed whether the gold had been mechanically reworked using material from the same source. That distinction would soon become critical. When gold reveals its memory. The doubts that lingered after the 2014 restoration were not driven by ideology or speculation. They came from materials science. X-ray fluorescence could confirm what elements were present in the mask, but it could not explain how those elements had been treated. Metal carries a physical history beyond chemistry. Heating, hammering, compression, and reshaping leave changes at the atomic level that X-rays cannot register. By the early 2020s, a new class of imaging was capable of detecting exactly that. The method is known as quantum resonance imaging, a technique developed within advanced physics laboratories to analyze crystalline stress patterns inside metals. Instead of measuring elemental composition, it reads how atoms are arranged, how they cooled, and whether they were disturbed after their original formation. In simple terms, it allows scientists to see whether metal remembers being altered, even when the surface looks flawless. So in 2024, a research team combining physicists and Egyptologists received permission from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities to conduct a limited, non-invasive scan of the mask. Officially, the session was framed as a calibration exercise intended to test the scanner on ancient gold. The examination took place inside the Grand Egyptian Museum after public hours, with the mask secured under controlled conditions. Initial readings aligned with previous studies. Large portions of the headdress showed consistent atomic structure. Stress patterns matched expectations for a single casting, followed by uniform finishing. For hours, nothing contradicted the conclusions drawn a decade earlier. The shift occurred when the scan focused on specific regions rather than the object as a whole. The first anomaly appeared along the boundary between the face and the headdress. The quantum data revealed a narrow outline where the gold had been heated to a different temperature than the surrounding metal. This pattern did not match decorative work or surface polishing. It indicated localized thermal treatment consistent with attachment rather than initial shaping. Crucially, the heating occurred from behind the visible surface, explaining why the glass inlays remained intact. Next came the ears. Under conventional imaging, they appeared solid and uniform. Quantum resonance imaging detected cylindrical regions within the lobes where atomic grain structure differed from the surrounding gold. These zones matched metal that had been inserted, compressed, and polished to match the original surface. The pattern was consistent with filled piercings rather than decorative design. The mask had not been made with unpierced ears. The holes had been deliberately erased. The most decisive evidence emerged from the cartouche, the oval frame containing the royal name. Quantum imaging showed that the gold beneath the hieroglyphs had been subjected to repeated mechanical stress. The atomic lattice had been flattened and reworked in a manner absent elsewhere on the mask. This was not engraving over a smooth surface, it was engraving over damage. Using these stress maps, researchers digitally reconstructed the erased inscription by tracing residual deformation left in the gold. The recovered characters did not spell Tutankhamun. They formed the throne name Neferneferuaten, the royal name associated with Nefertiti during her time as ruler. At that point, the question was no longer stylistic or symbolic. The mask contained physical evidence of removal, replacement, and renaming. The gold itself preserved the sequence of events. What had been invisible to chemistry was unmistakable to physics. What the mask ultimately confirms. By the time the quantum analysis was complete, the debate surrounding Tutankhamun's funerary mask was no longer theoretical. The sequence of modifications pointed to a clear historical process shaped by urgency, politics, and controlled memory. When Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, Egypt faced a crisis that extended beyond ritual. His reign followed years of religious upheaval under Akhenaten, and the state was actively restoring traditional worship centered on Amun. Stability depended on presenting continuity. A royal burial without proper equipment was unacceptable, yet time offered no flexibility. The 70-day limit imposed by religious law left no room for new fabrication at the scale required. The evidence indicates that a completed funerary mask already existed. That mask belonged to Nefertiti, who ruled as pharaoh under the throne name Neferuaten. As a reigning monarch, her burial equipment would have been prepared in advance, following full royal specifications. When her political legacy became inconvenient after the collapse of the Atenist period, her material presence posed a problem. Destroying a sacred object made of divine metal was unthinkable. Reusing it was both practical and discreet. Craftsmen undertook a precise transformation. The original face was removed from behind, using controlled heat and pressure that preserved surface detail and fragile inlays. A new visage reflecting Tutankhamun's features was attached without visible seams. The cartouche bearing Nefertiti's royal name was hammered flat until its symbols ceased to exist, then recarved with those of the boy king. The work was not rushed in execution, only in necessity. For more than 3,000 years, the result held. Traditional visual study saw nothing wrong. Chemical testing confirmed uniform composition. Only when technology capable of reading atomic stress patterns became available did the object's hidden history emerge. The mask did not lie by inscription alone. Its structure recorded each intervention in a way no artisan could erase. This finding reshapes how historians understand both figures. Tutankhamun was not honored with a purpose-built mask because circumstances made that impossible. His burial relied on adaptation, not deception. Nefertiti, long treated as a vanished queen, is confirmed through material evidence as a fully legitimate pharaoh whose royal identity was later suppressed. Her erasure was administrative, not accidental. The implications extend beyond a single artifact. If one of the most studied objects in human history concealed alterations this extensive, then assumptions about untouched royal burials must be reconsidered. Objects previously classified as stylistic anomalies may instead represent political revisions executed under pressure. History, in this case, was not rewritten with words, but with tools. The mask now displayed in the Grand Egyptian Museum still presents the face of Tutankhamun. That image remains accurate. What has changed is the understanding of what lies beneath it. The gold preserves two rulers, one visible and one deliberately hidden. Modern science did not add meaning to the artifact. It allowed the artifact to speak for itself, revealing how power, time, and survival shaped the record that endured.